Hi, my name is Sophie and I agreed to marry a billionaire for money. That part was simple. Embarrassingly simple. 5 minutes in a lawyer's office, one signature, done. What I didn't know, what nobody told me, was that he'd been watching me for 3 years before we ever spoke. That the job I'd landed when I was desperate, he arranged it. The apartment I found last minute after losing my previous one, he made it available. Every time something in my life broke and then somehow, inexplicably, fixed itself. There was one constant in the background: him. And by the time I found out, I was already living in his house, already wearing his ring, already feeling something I had absolutely no business feeling for a man I'd known for 6 weeks. This is the story of how I married a stranger for money and discovered I had walked straight into the center of someone else's entire world. I had been there the whole time. I just didn't know I wasn't alone. But before I continue, make sure to like, subscribe, and tell where you're watching from in the comments. Let me be honest about where I was before all this, because it matters. 27 years old, degree I wasn't using, job that paid slightly less than my rent, which, yes, is mathematically catastrophic, savings account that existed mostly in theory, and a best friend named Kara, who, when I explained my situation, said with complete sincerity, "Have you tried manifesting?" I love Kara. Kara has never once worried about a bill. I was not manifesting. I was calculating whether oat milk was a luxury I could still afford. And there is a difference. The offer came through a lawyer. An actual lawyer in an actual office with a leather folder and the practiced face of someone who has delivered unusual information before and has learned not to flinch while doing it. Contract marriage, minimum 1 year, monthly allowance. I read the number, assumed there was a typo, looked closer, confirmed there was not. Full expenses, housing, lump sum at conclusion. In exchange, public appearances, appropriate conduct and discretion. The groom, Dominic Hale. I knew the name. Everyone knew the name. Hale Industries was involved in approximately half of modern infrastructure, in a way that was both impressive and slightly ominous. Dominic Hale himself was known for being brilliant, private, and, depending on your source, either intensely controlled or simply strange in ways polite society had agreed to call eccentric. I asked the lawyer, why me? Mr. Hale will explain personally should you agree to a meeting. I thought about the electricity bill sitting on my counter. I thought about Kara telling me to manifest. When's the meeting? I said. I said yes, in 5 days. Worst decision of my life. Best decision of my life. I still haven't decided which. He was not what I expected. I had built a picture on the cab ride over. Old money arrogance. Loud in the way of people who have never needed to be quiet. The kind of man who enters a room like a statement. Dominic Hale was none of those things. He was contained. That was the word that arrived and stayed. A man who occupied exactly the space he chose to occupy. Not 1 inch more, not 1 inch less. Which sounds small until you're sitting across from it, and then it is profoundly unsettling. He stood when I walked in, waited until I sat, then folded his hands on the table and looked at me with eyes that were still. Not cold, not warm, still. Like someone who has been waiting for a very long time and has become exceptionally good at it. "Miss Reeves," he said. "Mr. Hale," I said. "I'll be direct. I need a wife. You need financial stability. The arrangement is clean." "Why me specifically?" "You're intelligent, practical. You don't perform." "You could find all of that in your own world. I don't want someone from my world," he said, simply, finally. Like the sentence had been waiting. I looked at him. And he looked back with the complete patience of someone not even slightly worried about the outcome. This man is strange, I thought. This is a strange man, and this is a terrible idea. "I'll need to review the contract," I said. Expected. I have questions. Also expected. I walked out of that office thinking I would go home, sleep on it, make a rational decision. Reader, I said yes in 5 days. The electricity bill was only part of it. The other part, the part I didn't want to look at, was the way he'd said, "I don't want someone from my world," and meant it so completely that for the first time in years, I felt like the specific person I was actually mattered. That should have been my first warning. The word house is doing a lot of work here. When what Dominic Hale lived in was less a house and more an architectural argument, vast, precise, expensive in the way that doesn't announce itself because it has nothing to prove. The staff were lined up when I arrived. Not one person, the full household staff, waiting, briefed. They greeted me by name. Then they showed me to my rooms. And here is where I should have asked more questions. The books on the shelf in my sitting room. Mine, not copies. My exact titles in the order I would have arranged them. The brand of face wash on the bathroom counter. Mine. The specific one that had been discontinued everywhere except one small pharmacy 20 minutes from my old apartment. My grandmother's specific brand of ginger tea, on the kitchen shelf like it had always been there. I stood in the middle of the room and did a full rotation. "Mrs. Park," I said to the housekeeper, who had the energy of someone who had seen everything and been surprised by none of it. "Yes, Mrs. Hale?" Mrs. Hale. That was going to take some getting used to. How did anyone know any of this? I gestured at the room, at all of it. "Mr. Hale provided a list," she said pleasantly. "A list," I said. "A very detailed list," she said, and excused herself. I stood in the room, filed it, opened the writing desk, and found the photograph. It was in the third drawer, not hidden, just placed, the way you place something ordinary. A photograph, printed. Me, walking out of a coffee shop, my usual Thursday coffee shop, wearing a jacket I'd owned for 2 years. I was not looking at the camera. I hadn't known there was a camera. Now the date stamp in the corner said 14 months ago. I sat down, then I stood up, then I walked, very quickly, very directly, to find my husband. He was in his study. I opened the door without knocking, which felt appropriate given the circumstances, and put the photograph on the desk between us. He looked at it, then at me. His expression did something. Not guilt, not alarm. More like the careful calibration of a person deciding how much to say. "Talk," I said. "You were never in any danger," he said. "That is genuinely not the reassurance you think it is. I was aware of you before the arrangement, for some time." "How long is some time, Dominic?" A pause. The first time I had seen him search for words. 3 years, he said. I sat down. My legs made that decision independently. "She'd 3 years," I repeated. "Yes. The job, 2 years ago, the one I got after being rejected everywhere else. The hiring manager owed me a favor. The apartment, last spring, available within 48 hours in a market where nothing existed. The previous tenant was relocating. I expedited the timeline." I stared at him. He stared back with the composure of a man explaining something he finds entirely reasonable. "Dominic." I kept my voice very level. "I need you to understand how this sounds." "I understand how it sounds." "You've been watching me for 3 years." "I've been ensuring you were safe," he said. "There's a difference." "To whom?" "To me." I laughed. Not the funny kind. The kind that comes out when your brain can't process the alternative. So let me get this straight," I said. "You've spent 3 years quietly managing my life. You arranged my job. You arranged my apartment. You have a photograph of me that I did not consent to. And now I'm living in your house as your wife." "Yes. And you see no problem with this." "I see," he said carefully, "that the framing is problematic. The intention was not." "Oh, well, the intention." I stood up. "Fantastic. I feel so much better." I walked out. He let me, which was somehow the most unsettling part of all of it. I did not leave. I know exactly how that sounds. But here is my defense. I needed information. I needed to understand the full shape of what I had walked into before I made any decisions. Running before I understood it felt like the one thing I could not afford to do. That was the practical reason. The other reason, the one I was not examining yet, was the always for you, the way he'd said it in the study like it was the most obvious fact in the world, like gravity, like weather. No one had ever said anything to me like that, so I stayed, and I started testing the edges. I had this tea as a kid, I told him at dinner. My grandmother's specific brand. I haven't found it anywhere in years. He nodded, said nothing. The next morning, 12 boxes on the kitchen counter, supplier in Osaka. I stood in front of them. Mrs. Park, I said. He placed the order last night, she said before I could ask. I picked up a box, set it down, picked it up again. If I mentioned I liked ice cream, I said, what would happen? She considered this with genuine seriousness. Oh, a factory would perhaps be excessive. A very reliable supplier, certainly. That evening at dinner, I looked at Dominic. I want to test something, I said. Go ahead. I like ice cream. Salted caramel when you're stressed, he said without looking up from his plate. Brown sugar vanilla when you're happy. You haven't ordered the brown sugar vanilla in approximately 8 months. I put my fork down. Dominic, that is deeply alarming. I know. You know, and you're just sitting there. Yes. 8 months, Dominic. I'll arrange a supplier, he said and continued eating. I looked at him across the table, this composed, strange, completely unembarrassed man, and felt the competing urges to leave immediately and to ask approximately 400 more questions fighting for position. And the questions won. They kept winning. That was becoming a problem. Here's where it stopped being funny. Gerald, I said one evening, my former landlord, the man who had made the last 6 months of my previous lease a masterclass in petty cruelty. Noise complaints filed against me, heat that was broken specifically in my unit, a lease renewal offer that arrived 3 days before I needed to be out. Gerald had sold the building 18 months ago, moved away, suddenly and quietly with no forwarding address that anyone I knew could find. Dominic turned a page of his book. The building had code violations, he said. Someone reported them. The scrutiny made continued ownership inconvenient. Someone, I said. He turned another page. My old boss, I said. My voice was getting quieter. Or sometimes quiet is the dangerous register. The one who took credit for my project, got me passed over for promotion, left the company 8 months ago, very suddenly with no public explanation. Accounting irregularities, Dominic said, discovered during a routine review. Routine. Thorough, he amended. I stood up from my chair. Dominic, look at me. He looked up. You have been removing people from my life. I've been removing problems from your life, he said. The distinction matters. It does not. I stopped, breathed. It does not matter as much as you think it does. Gerald was making you miserable, he said. Simply, your former employer was taking credit for your work and blocking your advancement. Or these were not people who deserved proximity to you. That is not your decision to make. No, he said. It isn't. A pause. I made it anyway. The room went very quiet, and here is the thing I cannot fully explain. The thing that makes this story complicated rather than simple. He wasn't defensive. He wasn't trying to talk me out of what I was feeling. He sat there and looked at me and said I made it anyway, like a person fully prepared to be accountable for a thing they would absolutely do again. I had spent years around people who couldn't own the smallest thing. We are having a very long conversation about this, I said. Tonight, after dinner. I'll have Mrs. Park make tea, he said. Stop being reasonable, I snapped. He almost smiled. When I left the room before I could do something inadvisable like smile back, His name was James Whitfield, and he was the particular kind of ex-boyfriend that reappears periodically in life like a weather event nobody asked for. He'd seen a photograph of me at a public event. Dominic and I had attended a foundation gala, and my face in the background had apparently reignited something. The first message, "Saw you at the Hale thing. Crazy. We should catch up." The second, when I didn't reply, "Come on, Soph. I miss you. We were good together." The third, 2 days later, "I hear you're married now? Is that real? Call me." I showed Dominic the thread at dinner. He read all 3 messages. His expression did not move. "Do you want to see him?" "No." He nodded, handed back my phone, continued eating. That was the conversation. And 5 days later, James sent one final message. "Hey, so this is random, but I'm actually relocating for work. Crazy timing, right? Anyway, take care of yourself." I stared at it. Then I stared at the ceiling. "Dominic," I said. James is relocating." "So I heard." "To where?" A pause. "Edinburgh." "Edinburgh. If you say lovely city, I'm going to—" "Very well-regarded city," he said. "Culturally rich." I put both hands flat on the table. "Dominic Hale," I said. "Did you send my ex-boyfriend to Scotland?" "Edinburgh is not technically Scotland." "He expressed interest in international opportunities," Dominic said, with the composure of a man who has rehearsed this conversation and found it adequate. I may have facilitated." "You may have." "I ensured the opportunity was visible to him," he said. "He made the decision himself." "That is the most—" I stopped. "You know what? Fine. But we need rules, Dominic. Actual, explicit rules starting right now. After dinner," he said. "Now. Sophie, your food is getting cold." "I don't care about the—" I looked at my plate. It was, in fact, extraordinary. He had cooked himself. He had learned somehow that I loved this specific dish. I picked up my fork. He did not say anything. He did not smile. But something around his eyes changed, just slightly, in a way I was beginning to learn to read. "This conversation is not over," I said. "I know," he said. "There's dessert after." Brown sugar vanilla. Of course there was. It came on a Thursday, which seems to be the day my life prefers for its crises. I'd been going through some paperwork, personal things, financial things, the administrative archaeology of merging a life into someone else's, when I found a file. Not hidden. Filed neatly, the way everything in Dominic's house was filed. A folder in a cabinet in the secondary office he'd given me, clearly placed there for me to find when I was ready, which was somehow more alarming than if it had been hidden. It was a file about me. Detailed. Years of it. Not invasive in the ways I'd feared. No private communications. Nothing that felt like a violation of the interior of my life. But thorough. Comprehensive in the way of someone who had paid very close attention from a distance for a very long time. Employment records, lease agreements, a note about my grandmother, newspaper clippings from a small feature I'd been included in 4 years ago, the first time I'd ever seen my name in print, something I'd been absurdly proud of, something I'd told no one. He had it, clipped and filed. I closed the folder. I sat for 5 minutes, then I picked it up and walked downstairs and into the main study and put it on the desk between us. His eyes moved to it, then to me. I watched him understand. "Sophie, don't," I said. "Just don't start with an explanation." I had thought I was calm. I was not calm. I was the specific variety of not calm that presents as calm right until it doesn't. "How much of my life have you documented?" I said. The words came out very controlled, very quiet, which meant the opposite of what quiet usually means. "How much of it is in folders, Dominic? How much of the last 3 years of my life have you been cataloging?" "It's not a file," I said, "about me in a cabinet in my office that you put there because you, what, wanted me to find it eventually? Wanted me to know? I didn't want you to feel like things were hidden," he said. So you left it for me to stumble across? The composure cracked. Not all of it, not everything, but enough. He stood up, moved from behind the desk, stopped 6 feet away, which was the most agitated I had ever seen him move, and I realized with a strange clarity that for Dominic Hale, 6 feet from the desk was the equivalent of another man pacing the room. "I didn't know how to tell you," he said. His voice was even, but something underneath it wasn't. Every version of telling you sounded, "I know how I sound, Sophie, and I know what this looks like. I know that 3 years ago, if I had appeared in your life and said what I'm saying now, you would have been frightened, and you would have been right to be frightened. I'm frightened now," I said, and my voice cracked on it, which I had not expected. "I'm standing in your house, married to you, and I'm looking at a file that tells me the last 3 years of my life happened inside someone else's plan. And I didn't know, Dominic. I didn't know." "I know. Don't say I know to me right now." "Sophie, was any of it mine?" I said. "The job, the apartment, the choices I made, I thought they were mine. I thought I was building something. I stopped. Something behind my eyes was burning, and I refused to let it go further than that. I thought I was doing it myself." The room was very quiet. When he spoke, his voice was lower than I had ever heard it. "You were," he said. "You did everything yourself. I only cleared the path. Every choice, every achievement, every decision. Those were yours. I didn't give you anything you didn't already deserve. I just made sure the obstacles didn't. I couldn't watch them stop you. I couldn't." "Sophie." He took 1 step forward, stopped, like he was asking permission to be closer and not sure it would be granted. "I understand if you're not. If this is too much. I've always understood that this might be too much." "Then why did you do it?" I asked. He looked at me. "Because doing nothing wasn't possible," he said. "Not for me. Not where you were concerned. I'm sorry that's not a satisfying answer. Or it's the only true one I have." I stood there in that room with the file on the desk between us, and I cried. Not loudly, not dramatically, just the specific exhaustion of someone who has been holding something complicated for too long and finally runs out of the energy to keep holding it. He didn't move, didn't reach for me, didn't try to fix it. He just stood there and let me, which was, I would later realize, the most considerate thing he could have done. I packed a bag that same evening. He was in the hallway when I came downstairs. He looked at the bag, then at me. "Okay," he said. "Just that." "I need to think," I said. "Somewhere that isn't this. I need to be outside of it for a minute." "Okay," he said again. He stepped to one side, made the path to the door completely clear. I looked at him. You're not going to try to stop me." "No." "Why not?" He held my gaze. Something in his expression was very careful and very open at the same time, which I hadn't known was possible on one face. "Because I have spent 3 years making sure every choice you made was yours," he said. "I'm not going to stop now." I stood there. "If you walk away," he said, "I won't chase you." A pause. "But I'll know you're safe. I'll always know." "That should terrify me," I said. "I know." "It doesn't," I said, and I hated that it didn't. I hated how much I hated the idea of walking out that door. I hated that 6 weeks with this strange, complicated, impossible man had reorganized something in me that I hadn't given him permission to touch. That's the problem, Dominic. That's the whole problem. It should scare me, and it doesn't, and I don't know what to do with that. He was quiet. "I can't tell you what to do with it," he said. "That's yours." I looked at him for a long time. Then I put the bag down, not because of the money, not because of the contract, because the look on his face when I put it down, the thing that moved through his expression for one unguarded half-second before he controlled it again, was the most honest thing I had ever seen on a human face. "I'm not saying I'm fine," I said. "I am not fine. We have a lot of things to talk about. I know. Real conversations, not managed ones. Yes. And no more removing people without telling me. No more arranging things without my knowledge. If something is a problem, you tell me, and we decide together. Agreed, he said. Completely. And you have to stop being so calm, I said. It's infuriating. Something moved across his face. The almost smile, the one I had learned to look for. I'll try, he said. I make no promises. Of course not, I said. I went back upstairs. I was smiling before I reached the top step. I was furious at myself for smiling. Both things were true. We did not become simple. I want to be clear about that. There were more hard conversations. There were nights I lay in the dark and thought about the file and felt the complicated knot of it all over again. There were moments where I looked at him across a room and thought, "You are genuinely unlike any person I have encountered in my entire life in a way that was not always comfortable." But here is what I also found. He cooked properly, quietly, the way someone does when it's genuinely for themselves and not an audience. He made pasta one Sunday evening that made me eat in embarrassing silence for longer than was socially acceptable. "You're staring," he said. "This is remarkable pasta." It really isn't. "Dominic, I need you to understand that no one has ever made me pasta like this." He tried very hard not to look pleased. He failed. He disagreed with me. Properly. Completely without apology. Which I found startling after years of people who folded to avoid conflict. He held his positions. He held my positions in high regard even when he disagreed with them, which is a different and rarer thing. He showed up. Not loudly, not with gestures or performances, just consistently, in the specific, undramatic way of someone who has decided something and doesn't need to be applauded for the decision. One night, I couldn't sleep and found him already awake in the study. He looked up, said nothing, just moved so there was room beside him on the settee. I sat there for an hour in the quiet. When I finally got up to go back to bed, I stopped at the door. "Dominic." Why me, really? Not the practical answer. A long silence. "Because I watched you handle everything alone," he said, "for years, and you were extraordinary at it. And I thought, someone this capable of managing alone should never have to." I stood in the doorway for a moment. "That's either very romantic or very alarming," I said. "Probably both," he said. "Probably both," I agreed. I went to bed, lay in the dark. Thought about someone this capable of managing alone should never have to. Thought about the fact that no one, not once in 27 years, had framed it that way. Like my independence was something to be honored rather than exploited. Like the fact that I had managed alone was impressive rather than convenient. I stared at the ceiling for a long time. Then I thought, oh no, because I knew what oh no meant, and there was absolutely nothing I could do about it. I found a photograph recently, not the Thursday one, not the surveillance photograph that started all of this, a new one, taken properly with my knowledge at an event we attended last month. I'm in it facing the camera, laughing at something just off frame. Dominic is beside me. He's not looking at the camera, he's looking at me. And the expression on his face is the one I now know is the unguarded version. The one that lives underneath the composure, that surfaces when he forgets briefly to contain it. It says everything his careful sentences take longer to arrive at. I put the photograph on the writing desk, the same desk where I'd found the other one. Then I went downstairs and told him I'd found it. I know, he said without looking up. I put it there. Of course you did. I sat across from him. He looked up. That steady, still look. The one I had learned was not coldness, had never been coldness, but its exact opposite. An attention so total it had nowhere to go but still. Dominic, I said, Sophie. I'm glad I said yes. Something moved across his face, brief, complete. more honest than anything I had learned to expect from him, and which meant more honest than most things I had seen from anyone. "So am I," he said. I had married him for money. What I had not known, walking into that lawyer's office with an electricity bill waiting at home, telling myself this was purely practical, purely calculated, a simple transaction between two people with compatible needs, was that I was not walking into an arrangement. I was walking into a world that had been built around me, quietly and patiently, without my knowledge, a world where I had always been the center of someone else's everything, where I had been watched and waited for and chosen, completely without condition, by a man who had decided, long before I knew he existed, that I was the thing worth organizing his entire life around. I had thought I was making a calculated decision. It turned out the calculation had already been made. I just hadn't known yet that I was the answer. If you like this story, please support us by subscribing and liking, and kindly drop a comment on the location from where you're watching. Thank you.